There's one.
Morgan's on the phone.
Okay.
Which one of these three are we listening to?
All right, everyone, we are back to discuss amendments on our flood bill. And we have with us Rep. Teddy to discuss his proposal of amendment.
Is it the one that says Kornheiser?
Yes, he is here to speak with the Kornheiser amendment. That is they're doing that as a duet, I believe. And so, yes, please join us, sir, to run through the overview on this, and then we'll speak to council because this one is the most technical of the amendments we'll be doing today.
Hello, everyone. Teddy Wozniak, Berry City. So as the chair mentioned, this is generously described as a technical amendment. There are 4 municipalities in our state, Burlington, Williston, Montpelier, and Middlebury, who, through the wisdom of municipal leadership, has enshrined the 70-30 local options tax share in their charter change that enabled the local options tax. So in short, all this amendment does is supersede those charters to allow them to take advantage of the 75-25 split that we are changing the local options tax to within the greater H397. And so each section it's one big instance of amendment, but section 14, the first one there, makes the change for Burlington. 14A makes the change for Montpelier, 14B makes the change for Middlebury, and 14C makes the change for Williston. And the language is slightly different in each of them, but that is what is functionally happening as part of this one.
Rep. Hago.
Thanks. Just a quick question, Teddy, do they have to vote on whether they want to change it to 75-25 in their communities? It's just automatically going to go to 75-25.
Yeah.
Even though they voted to have it be 70-30.
Yes.
To be clear.
Yes, and they did that because that's what the statute read at the time. So they were it's advised to municipalities to be as consistent in charter changes as with statute, so they did the 70-30. But it was the intention of Ways and Means when we changed the formula in the other section of statute to just change local options tax writ large to 75-25. So this would just supersede that.
Thanks.
And Ways and Means are uphold at 1100.
Okay. I was raising this while you were talking, so apologies if you spoke to this. Has somebody notified the municipalities that the changes are occurring?
We have not. I assume Ledge Council has not either. That's not their job.
Okay.
Sounds like it might be the legislature's job.
No, I understand that. but-
Good news. Here's 5% more.
No, totally. I mean, it's not a
PR. Come on.
not a bad email to get. I'm just wondering if they sent an email. So, okay. Any questions for the member from Ways and Means? If not, we'll shift over to council and run through the words.
Good morning, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Council. You have in front of you an instance of amendment to H397 presented by Representatives Kornheiser and Wozniak. As Representative Wozniak pointed out, there are 4 charters that are amended within one instance of amendment here. And the overlying purpose here is to for those 4 municipalities, allow them to take advantage of the proposed 75-25 split of the local option tax revenue as proposed by H397 as it passed on second reading just yesterday. So as background here, I can't say for certain, looking through the legislative history, whether the voters of these 4 municipalities really wanted an enduring 70-30 split. There's one municipality that was not included here because it was actually very clear what they wanted, and that was the town of Montgomery had expressed language in their charter saying that in no case would their local option tax be lower than 70%. but that otherwise it would be tied to 24 VSA 138. So they predicted into the future that the local option tax revenue share would shift. And they said, it's not going to go below 70 for our town, but if it goes higher, we're still tied to 138, we'll ride. It is likely that all of this language, because there were already cross references to the general law built into this, they were just trying to take the express terms of 24 VSA 138 and incorporate it into their charter. So it was, as I say sometimes, copy pasta. It's copy paste with a little bit of spice on it. So some individualization here.
Charcoal, as it were.
So Burlington is first here. It's the amendment to 24 Appendix Chapter 3, Section 102D, the local option sales tax authority for the city of Burlington. And it ties the tax payments and the share of the cost to 24 VSA 138. 14A, 24 Appendix Chapter 5, that's the city of Montpelier, amends Section 1214, their local option tax section, again, to eliminate a reference to the 70% share. And just to let you know, Montpelier had previously referenced in that section 24 VSA 138, so I didn't have to add a cross-reference there. They were already tied into the general law. Section 14B, 24 App Chapter 127, that's the town of Middlebury, amends Section 1308A to eliminate references to the 70% share, tie them specifically to 24 VSA Section 138, give them the cross-reference. Section 14C, 24 App Chapter 171, that's the town of Williston, Section 18. Same thing, a little more strike through, a little more added cross references, just because I wanted to change as little as possible here and achieve the cross reference without inadvertently causing agita for any of these communities by reaching into their charters. One note that I do have here, just based on some of the questions from the Ways and Means Committee this morning, there is still a reference to the 70% allocation here in the second sentence of Section 18 in Williston's charter. And that states that the town tax shall be implemented in the event that the state local option tax as provided for in 24 VSA 138 is repealed or the 70% allocation to the town is reduced. So I didn't want to change that to 75% because this language appears to establish a contingency based on the date that this specific charter section was passed and looking forward. And I didn't want to alter to 75% and inadvertently cause an interpretation that we are now moving that contingency-based clause forward in time to the present moment.
Okay.
It also keeps that 70% floor for them instead of raising the bar to 75. And if they want to amend that language, they can always come back.
And then that'll just align it with the practice.
And Representative Pango asked the question of whether the communities have to vote to approve this. Nope, this is state law. You can amend it as you see fit. So if it's the will of the legislature and you could imagine doing such an awful thing, you could wipe all of the municipalities from the face of the earth and just be the state of Vermont with no municipal corporations. And that's my very concise way of saying, as it creates, so may it destroy, which is part of Dylan's rule.
Wielding the authority. All right, hands. I thought I saw Sandy's first, so we'll go with Sandy, then we'll go to Nugent.
Okay, two questions, because I'm new. Does this, and it's tied to the emergency management and flood response, are the towns obligated to use that money for just that? Or is it for anything? And if not, why is it tied to this? Just one of those that we threw it onto a bill?
So the local option tax section that was added by House Ways and Means is intended to be tied to the voluntary buyout program and the municipal grand list stabilization program specifically. So if you remember that program, which I'll call Muggles, because I feel like it's a good acronym that the Ways and Means Committee deserves all the credit for creating. So the Muggles program is intended to reimburse municipalities for the loss of grand list value when properties are bought out and converted into open space, right? It's no longer going to be residential property, commercial property. It's not going to be valued the same. There's going to be a loss in their taxable value. So the program reimburses the municipality for 10 years. And that money is drawn from the pilot fund. And the pilot fund is entirely funded by local option tax revenue.
So what about all those other towns that have the local option tax? That money is not.
So separately, the municipalities that are chartered, some have specifically designated programs that are supported by their share of the local option tax revenue. 24 VSA section 138 allows the revenue to be used for any municipal purpose except for education spending. And that's the only prohibition that's built into 24 VSA section 138, except for a very discrete subdivision that really only applies to the city of South Burlington that deals with aviation jet fuel taxes, because that money has to, instead of being sent to the pilot fund, it gets sent to the transportation fund because of aviation law.
Gotcha.
I'll just say that broadly, federal aviation law that requires that any tax on jet fuel or any tax on really the airport itself has to be reinvested in
So,
transportation, aviation.
Is there any danger for any of these communities that the legislature could decide that it wants a 60-40 split instead, change it in statute, and then the charter is no longer?
Yes, and thank you for that very excellent question, because it's a risk that I highlighted for Ways and Means this morning. By tying the cross-reference here to 138, there is a risk that this could drop below 70 as it was initially in the charter. There's no floor built in here. The alternate risk is one that you're dealing with, which is that the General Assembly continues to increase the percentage and you have to go through a charter vote every time to increase your allocation that is being afforded to every other municipality in the state.
Is it possible to make it so it's like at least 70? But if the state goes higher, then we go with that or something like that.
You could amend each one of these charters to cross-reference 138 and say, but not less than 70%. Be slightly more technical drafting, but I could absolutely do that.
I like Representative Nugent's idea. We would not have to do that for Montgomery, right? Because they already have thought of it. They have a crystal ball in my neck of the woods. Sorry, may I ask what the discussion was in Ways and Means when you suggested that this could become an issue at some point in time? Was there any discussion?
I don't want to characterize the committee's discussion and inadvertently misstate their feelings on this, so.
Or could we ask Rep. Wazazak?
I was already looking at Representative Ways and Means.
Yes, so even with this, so more towns year over year are adopting local options taxes, which is continuing to increase the revenues into the pilot special fund. And indeed the surplus from the special fund. So even with a change to 75-25 and fully funding the municipal grand list stabilization program, there would still accumulate $1.3-ish million surplus annually into the pilot special fund. So we do not foresee any situation anytime soon where we have to change the percentages to a low.
Can I ask another sort of unrelated question, but it was brought up by the LCT when we talked about this?
That sounds like a loaded question. Please proceed.
The Did your committee discuss at all returning that money back to the municipalities that's in the surplus?
Committee has not discussed what to do with the existing and further.
Thank you. That closes the loop for me.
For the committee's edification on this as well, the General Assembly would have to pass another act to change the percentages, and that would be an opportunity for a legislative council. Maybe I won't be here anymore, but I was the one that raised the flag on these 4 communities having something set in charter with a specific percentage amount. Legislative council could always indicate in the future, hey, there's also these chartered communities that used to have specific percentages that no longer do.
Rep. Nugent?
I guess maybe this is more of a comment. Just thinking about like the landscape of the economy that may or may not occur, and that dollars are going to be maybe more precious and putting cities in this potential precarious situation where that might become a thing where we're talking about. I just wonder if it would be helpful to find out what they want to do.
So is that a proposal for now or for later?
Maybe if we could just hear from them, well, it would make me feel better, I think, to know what they're thinking. Yes, now.
So that's a no. Okay. Any other questions from any other folks here? So speaking to the ones that are impacted by this, yep. They're not even aware, which is on, they're gonna need time to digest. Rep. Waters Evans.
I just want to clarify. So like, let's say it goes down to 60% for some reason. We could go back. We could come back to this and change it so that there's a minimum of 70. We can all, like, nothing's permanent.
Well, yeah, we can always, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
nothing's permanent. I mean, it's like what we do here, right? So within the context of this moment, though, what we're doing is we are just like getting this to be mirrored to the other action that we're taking.
Right.
And that's the baseline here. I think kind of like what you're talking about is a little bit of a bigger conversation where you can formally within. Yep, that's it. So I think right now, focusing on this for the moment of the bill itself, and then having that conversation about how these mechanisms work more broadly, would that be okay? Rep. Goff.
Yes, going back actually,
So which is it?
and also what Tucker said. If we do this right now and the towns are now eligible that have that 70% locked in their charter, and now we change their charter right now to the 75-25 split. If we were gonna lower that percentage, say, like you said, to 60, it dropped to 60, became a 60-40. That would still have to be a vote on the floor to do that. We couldn't, that would be something that would be.
Yeah, that's
bill that
action of the body. Yes.
the action of the body, that would be an action of the House and Senate to do that. So we would know ahead of time and be able to say, hey, we already have one town that's locked in at 70. And we could prevent it from going below that 70 regardless by being, and that would actually come through our committee, wouldn't it? So there is that safety net there that we would have to see that and know what we did. Okay. I'm just trying to get clarification
No,
on that.
no. Yeah, no, all good questions. And this is a lot of, yeah. newer subject matter with how dense these specific mechanisms are. So yes, please ask those clarifying questions so we all understand. Rep Hisnall.
Can you tell me, excuse me, who the four towns again are?
Burlington, Montpelier, Middlebury, Williston.
Thank you.
And so my plan is right now, because we do have a series of amendments on this bill, is to just hear all the instances of amendment, and then we'll take a straw poll on all of them one by one before lunch. Any further questions on this one? No, okay. So next up, I guess we could forego the theatrics and pageantry of me coming up to the witness chair. We're on a clock, man.
I really want a chance to interpret.
We'll find another way. We'll find another time. Council, what are we doing with my instance of amendment?
Representative Byron's amendment is, it is technical. Purely technical. Section 7 of the bill, was a session law provision related to some temporary programs to support municipal corporations. But as it passed through multiple iterations and as it was included in your final report, it is now an enduring program that is going to be permanent until altered or amended by the General Assembly. So because of that, it should not be in session law. It should be codified in the Vermont statutes annotated. So Representative Byron's amendment goes into that section 7, designates this as 20 VSA section 52 and gives it a section heading. And that's all that it does. It doesn't touch any of the operative provisions within there. It just makes sure that it gets a spot in Title 20 so that it can be found in the future. Otherwise, you have to go to the white books, and I only see one over there on the shelf. There's hundreds of years of them.
Sounds like a trip to archives.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is exactly that. That's why I wanted to keep this one brief and to the point. Is it's just codifying these in statute so they don't fall off inadvertently after we set them up.
Jim, you did this all by yourself? I'm really impressed.
It was a team effort, 95-5.
It was all,
Ain't no 60-40. Sorry.
it was all Representative Byron's decision and choice. I just admitted to the chair that I made a mistake in draft 2.4 of the committee's report by not making sure that this was designated somewhere. And then I was given direction to fix the mistake.
And that is how this loop is being closed. Yeah, so that is a technical but very, very important amendment to this piece of legislation. All right.
Let's cover now.
We're gonna do all
All
of
of
them.
it.
Yeah, we'll do all, that was the plan from the beginning, and I just want to make sure I want to give Jay a little bit more time.
Okay.
Around.
The only other amendment that I see posted on the committee page, at least when I brought this up, was Representative Wood's
Correct.
amendment. And I do want to say that I have, there's going to be a draft 2.1 of this that is slightly different. So if the committee is okay with that, I'll describe what draft 2.1 is. It achieves the same policy objective. It just does it in a different way. So Representative Wood's amendment requires the Agency of Human Services to be included in the portion of the statewide emergency management plan promulgated by the Division of Emergency Management and the Chief Recovery Officer. And draft 2.1 is going to make it specific that the Agency of Human Services is consulted for purposes of the check-ins on vulnerable populations. So instead of having them be a collaborator on all of the statewide emergency management plan, it's going to amend subdivision 4B to require emergency management to collaborate with AHS just for purposes of coming up with the plan for doing safety and wellness checks on older Vermonters and individuals with disabilities.
And you'll remember this is sort of rooted in her line of questioning for me on the floor. So,
I'm gonna format that amendment to strike out subdivision 4B in its entirety, but those will be the changes. AHS will be included. And if you remember on the floor yesterday, she pointed out that aging populations is not the right term under the subjects that committee deals with. It is older Vermonters. So that will be another little discrete change in there.
and that's just for like as defined within the governing statutes.
And there's statutory directive on the Office of Legislative Counsel and the General Assembly broadly to use sensitive terms, sensitive language, and older Vermonters is the appropriate term to be used to describe aging populations.
Consistency in statute.
You just moved here. You're not a-
Consistency in statute. Okay, thank you very much, council. And I did get a message that Rep. Wood was on her way to discuss this with us. But I'm sure it's gonna mirror what council provided in his testimony. And then we also have Representative Galfetti coming in to discuss a proposal of amendment on 244. Autumn, why don't you take us off for a minute while we